morning, Patrice. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. So, first of all, thank you for joining me. Um, I asked Richard to join me today because I've been thinking about talking to people about how they build relationships. And when I think of somebody who does it really well, I think of you, Richard. I think of
Oh,
you and just how you maintain relationships, how you build relationships, not only in your personal life, but also in your work life, in your business and I just thought I would have a conversation with you about that because I just think that you could add a lot to that topic. And but first, I want you to just give me a brief, like, what are you doing these days with work and what's going on?
so I am an architect for those that are listening, and I'm also a neuroscientist. So I have a dual perspective. So I first became a licensed architect, then I went to study in the sciences and education about the brain, and so I basically fell in love with learning and education. So I look at things from two perspectives. So currently, I'm working on as a building architect. I have a business partner both here in the United States and in London, and we're building a high-rise office building in London called Project 42. But we have projects in Greece. We have things that we're doing all over. Because of COVID, things have been on hold. So that's kind of the big idea. My Speaking about relationships, I met my business partner in London because we were both invited to speak at a conference in Mexico, and there was a panel of 5 people on the dais, and she and I were talking the most.
That's a surprise.
That's a total surprise. So we ended up coming together. So I'm working on something as a startup that's a cardiac digital twin of the heart. It's artificial intelligence in the heart, but we're looking at it with medicine. And I'm looking at some other inventions and innovations as well. But I'm also a building architect. And so I teach design, I teach business, and I teach ethics at a
So,
university.
when you think about the work that you do, what lights you up the most about what you do? Because you've talked about you talk about this broad range of things, and I know you as being incredibly creative, and you just ideas just pour out of you. And I'm just curious, out of all of that stuff, like when you're like, this is what I would do in my sleep without being paid, what is the thing you love the most,
So I love to deliver innovative ideas,
no matter what they are?
no matter what they are. You could ask me to go grocery shopping. You could ask me to set the dinner table. You could ask me to come up with a cardiac digital twin of your heart. I love to deliver innovative ideas. That is what drives me. But all of those are people focused. I love people. And I've always found that I personally design things for people to thrive. I want you to thrive. I want the listeners to thrive. And so I listen carefully for opportunities for them or in my conversations to see where I might be able to help them. So I'm always thinking, how can I help you thrive? Um, and that's how I work. I mean, as an architect, you sit down with someone and I have to build this school, or I have to build this hospital, or I have to build this, I was the Disneyland architect. We have to build these attractions or rides or restaurants. No matter what we were doing, it was for people. So my love of people wanted you to thrive. I wanted you to have a good experience. I wanted you to be productive. Um,
Yeah.
does that
That's
make sense?
interesting. That I have a similar approach to what I do. Is I do what I do because I want people to grow and develop. So I totally get where you're coming from, and you have a really clear idea of what your purpose is. One of the things I'm curious about is, because you're such an idea person and you come up with these sometimes ideas that people haven't even thought of yet, and you want to share them with them, but some people might not be open to your ideas. How do you help them become open to your ideas?
Okay, you have helped me with this, right?
I
So
have.
you have helped me with this. And the reason I'll say that is because I have been trying to figure out why I have certain why I can take something that happened in the past and then kind of tune it up for the future. And so I think that's just common sense or common knowledge, or it's not so common. So what, I guess, how would I describe it best? It's a good question, Patrice. You got me. So I would say that I listen for people the way they speak. So for example, if somebody says to you, I feel ... or I think ... I immediately know that they're more analytical and they're more creative.
Yeah.
So I know how to speak. I'll phrase things to the left brain and I'll phrase things to the right brain. I'm like, they're gonna wanna know how much, if it's analytical, how much, what size, what's the timeline, what's the calendar. They're gonna wanna know quantitative stuff. The feeling people will wanna know the effect. This is gonna make you more productive, more influential. This is gonna make you more successful. This is gonna help you restore, renourish, rejuvenate.
Yeah.
You know, there's more of a sensory experience. The diners are going to have a more enjoyable time. They're going to extend their stay. You know, so when I listen to the way that people communicate, I recognize, am I talking to a left brain person or a right brain person?
So you're really intentional about the words you choose and how you deliver the message to the different people, depending on the type of thinker they are or the type of personality they are.
Yes, because I want to speak their language. It's like somebody comes to you and you could hear them speaking French or you could hear them speaking Italian. I want to try to speak French so that they feel the love, right? Or I want them to speak Italian. I want to speak. So I try to speak in their language so I communicate with them. So I create, to your point, what you've helped me with is that the first step of everything is self-awareness, right? So the first thing is I had to be careful. How do I communicate? Then I need to say, how does my friend Patrice communicate?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, we're similar. So I don't have to think about it as often. But when I have somebody who's maybe doesn't always, transform spaces like I do, this is a scary process for them. And then I kind of like, okay, I got to help them get there.
Yeah. It's funny when you and I have worked together in a variety of capacities. Richard actually introduced me to my husband. But so we work together at Disneyland, not in the same department. But Richard has helped us design some of the things going on in our house. And one of the things I always think of you, Richard, when working with you is you're very careful about how you share ideas or how you give feedback on something that you would think would be different. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know. I assume you're intentional. It's a habit you've built up about what you do. But do you know what I'm talking about specifically?
The two doorways, or the idea is that would you consider?
Yeah.
Have you considered? Have you looked at all the options?
Yes. You always ask a question. Like, actually, you always ask for permission. This is what I think of you. Before you give any kind of feedback about the space that I'm in or some design thing, you say, can I make a suggestion? Whether it's helping me design a space or just giving me feedback on my space, you always say, can I make a suggestion? And I always appreciated that about you and was curious about, was that something that you intentionally started to do, or was it something that you just did naturally and it became a habit?
No, I learned the hard way. So when I got married, my in-laws are all science people and they had never met a creative person. And I would go over to their house and I'd be like, guys, you have they were building, my wife, they bought a house. And I said to them, can I make a suggestion? I said, you have a view. Why don't we flip your house that they're building and put the garage on this side and this? And that was the beginning of how they met me. And they're like, you just flipped my house. And then I said, yeah, and you have a pie-shaped lot. Instead of being parallel with this side, that's a non-view. Let's be parallel with this side of the lot. That's this view. So what I realized is I was causing them stress.
Yeah.
But they went along with it. They understood it. So I realized that I had to be more aware because of family that you love. Hey, can I make a suggestion? This might be something you really want to consider right now.
Right.
Here's all your assets. Are you inventorying? You have a piece of land. It's a pie shape. It has a view. maybe orient your house towards the view. Oh, and if you're going to orient the house towards the view, the garage should probably not be facing the view. Maybe we should have the family room. And I kind of built the conversation like that, something a little bit more. Or I tell people my own personal experience, like the master bathroom shower sets your mood. I like to make sure the sun is in the right place. The kitchen sink, you're at the sink a lot. Do you see outside? Do you connect with the other people in your home? Those two things are high touch points, and those are big deals.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the human thing. And, I do ask permission. And the other thing is I can't lie. Right. So this is
and that's the other thing. You can see on your face when it's something that
So I say, she's like, what do you think of my new blah blah blah? And I'm like, ooh, you asked me, I can't lie. So I have to say, not so much.
Yeah.
And then
you deliver it in a kind way. But so let's go on that. What happens? I assume everybody gets into conflicts in their work life or at home life. We don't have to talk about home life, but in work life, if there's a conflict, how do you resolve conflicts with people? Whether it's a client or a partner or a colleague, do you have something in your head you can think of where you've had a conflict and have to resolve it? And what do you do?
It's funny. Last night I got a phone call from a kitchen designer in Nashville, Tennessee, who was really a famous, fabulous designer, and was really struck and did a showcase house. And the purchasers of the showcase house wanted to make some changes. And he was really upset. And I said, okay. I said, I think the first thing is, regardless if, they wanted blue or green, I said, the first thing is just to connect with people. I see how upset you are. The first thing is acknowledgement for me. So whenever I get into conflict, I can say, Patrice, I see how upset you are. I don't want you to be upset. So, acknowledging it and validating it is the first step. That also works well in marriage for me. So when my wife gets mad at me, I'll say, oof, gosh,
recognizing, so being empathetic, recognizing that they're showing some sort of
first
emotion.
thing is validate it. I don't justify it. I don't defend it. I go right into, I see how upset you are. Okay. And then I try to figure out, why are you upset? Right. So I'll say, not try to solve it. I'm just trying to say why I'm upset. Was it a time constraint? Like, I always think that there's probably three things, which is you're managing expectations. Was there a quality concern? Was it a time concern? Or was it a budget concern?
Right.
Like, why are you upset? Did you not have enough time to do this? Or did you not have enough? Did this not come out the way you wanted it? Or did it cost less or more than you wanted? Like, what was it that made you upset? So I try to figure out what it was. And then I also subconsciously, I figure out, where are they coming from? I always think to myself, right now during COVID, especially, when you're a teacher, you have all these students in your classroom, and even though they see you on the screen, you don't know what's happening in their life. So I always try to take their temperature in the classroom. So I'll ask slight general questions, but not literally, but do you have a roof over your head? Right? Do you have food on the table? And is anybody that you care about ill, injured?
Are your needs being met? Your general needs being met?
Are your general needs being met? Those primary needs are your three, because if they're not, everything else is, you're not going to hear it. So I always, because of COVID, I'm like, are you doing okay? Like, we're all adjusting, but like, are you having other stresses? Right. So I listen for those three things, your primary needs, because in high schools, children get recruited into gangs when those three primary needs are not met. And so they're more susceptible to being recruited.
Oh,
and so when you know that, you realize I need to check in with someone to make sure, they're not, getting distracted or swayed. So anyway, so that is as a parent, but also as a teacher.
Yeah.
Those are the things that come up.
And you made me think, when people are under stress, sometimes they do weird things or they respond in weird ways. And oftentimes when I'm coaching people And a lot of the coaching I do is relationship based. Like, how do you develop relationships with people on your team? And sometimes there'll be people who just do not get along, or they just rub each other the wrong way. And I try to tell people, like, if that person's doing something, oftentimes that has nothing to do with you. You may be the recipient of their bad mood, but really it has nothing to do with you. They could be under stress. They could be dealing with things at home that you have no idea, and it's coming out in weird ways. And if you can shift your thinking to more of an empathetic point of view, like, okay, something else is going on with them, this isn't about me. How would I deal with it differently, as opposed to just getting into it and going back at them?
Yeah, empathy, Patrice, like I think because of where we came from in a business world, we realized how important it is to be empathetic to our customers
Yeah.
and how important it is to be empathetic to our colleagues. It's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Um,
It's huge in building relationships. It's like
it's huge.
almost number one.
Yeah, and I don't even think about it anymore because I have found I treat everybody, you're my friend forever. We've been friends, but I mean, anybody who would meet me today would get the same version of me. I
Right.
wouldn't give anybody anything less or more. So what was interesting is I'm always empathetic, is I take their temperature in the sense of, how are you doing? A well check, I call it. How is
Yeah.
everybody doing? Not and then sometimes you'll hear things, or I know I'm like, oh, I'm out of sorts today. Why am I out of sorts? Oh, I don't know. Whatever my reasoning is, I try to create self-awareness and figure out why I'm out of
Yeah.
sorts that day. With when you have colleagues that are upset, usually unhappy, in my experience, unhappy people want others to be unhappy, and I have to be
It's
careful.
contagious.
Contagious. So if you're irritable, you'll be irritable, and if you're anxious, you might be anxious, and I have to be careful of that, because I think during COVID, when people start to engage with each other, you may want to wear a mask, you may not want to wear a mask. You may want to be 6 feet, you may not want to be 6 feet. You may want this, you may not want this. The simplest things now of communicating have now taken on a different effect.
Right.
And so now I have to be careful of, like, there was an older person in the store the other day, and she was just talking to me. And I was like, okay, she must need to talk. And I was with my daughter, we were buying shoes. And I'm like, she was telling me all about these shoes for my daughter. And I was like, thank you for your advice. I mean, obviously I'm a guy buying shoes, so I could learn a lot. Right. So, and I remember thinking to myself, I got a time constraint. I don't have time to chit chat. And then I think, this person it's not like one conversation. She must have had like that shoe and da-da-da. And I thought, okay, she needs to communicate. So I'm going to open myself up. I think, Patrice, my greatest successes in business have been having an open personality to accidental conversations.
Yeah.
These opportunities for people to engage us and have meaningful conversation. If I'm always in my head on my calendar, I got this, and I don't leave time to meet, like today, like for us in our meeting, I always say on Wednesdays, today's Thursday, but on Wednesdays, I give myself the whole day to be completely flexible. So if I'm going to have a deeper conversation like we're having today, I allow for that to happen. I don't say I can't do it this month. No, every week I leave room.
Yeah, that's great. And I really appreciate it, because this has been an amazing conversation. One other thing I noticed that you do really well, and I think it's part of how you not only build relationships, but keep relationships, is that you reach out regularly. And when I say regularly, it may be, if we don't talk a few times a year, I'll get a text with just, hey, how you doing? And I know you have a lot of friends. So is that something that you like spread out? How do you like manage that with the amount of people? Because I know that you have that kind of relationship, not just with me, but a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny? Whenever I think of you, I text you.
Oh, okay.
So I don't put it off. And I do this, and I tell my wife to do this too. When we're in a conversation and somebody comes up, and I'm like, I wonder how they are. And I go, I'm just going to send you a quick text. How are you? Hope you're well. I am giving permission to my subconscious to engage in something that my analytical side is saying, you don't have time to say hello. And my subconscious is saying, hey, I wonder how my friend is, because we all know how quickly life goes.
Yes.
And so I make an effort. And I mean, I'll text people that I met in Europe on a plane. Whenever they come into my awareness, I'm like, oh, that's so funny. This reminds me of them. You know, like we got stuck in a snowstorm once, right?
Yeah.
So whenever I see the first thing of snow, I'm like, oh, it's so funny. I remember that one time, and I'll send you a text. Or you were telling me earlier about a Christmas tree ornament. Like I'll send you a text. Hey, how are you? I'm thinking of you. And that's it. And it's kind of like as if we were passing in the building, I would say good morning.
But you know what that does from the receiver's point of view? Well, it keeps us connected, but then it allows for me to continue the conversation. And those times that you've reached out have turned into like hours on the phone, or conversations like this, or you coming to meet me for lunch and brainstorming business, and like just you know, it's one of those things where you said you have to allow for people to accidentally have conversations, because I think that people do come into your life and do come into your awareness at different times for different reasons. And I appreciate that you act on them, because I feel like that action has been a gift to me and allowing us to collaborate and continue kind of working together.
I appreciate that, Patrice. It means a lot to me. Well, I don't think we all recognize how lucky we are in the quality of the people we know. And because of our business, we don't realize that we actually have a wonderful relationship of people that are really good people. And it's something worthy of working on, you know?
Yeah.
I know, I don't know if I told you the story about I missed the plane when I was in Italy.
Tell me again, I don't remember.
So I switched bank accounts, and I was traveling, coming back from Milan, Italy, and I'm on the phone with my wife because my new credit card's not working overseas. I forgot to tell them I was traveling. So they don't have an 800 number, they don't have weekend hours, and I'm on the phone with my wife, and I miss my flight.
Oh no.
And it's the last flight, and I don't have any credit card. So
I'm stuck here in Italy forever.
I'm stuck here in Italy. And my wife's like, of course you're stuck in Italy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I couldn't understand what was going on. I was so frustrated. I'm like, the plane left early. And if you know, nothing in Italy leaves early. And this flight left early. And it was the last flight. So here I am, no credit card, in the airport, no hotel. And all of a sudden, all these accidental conversations come by. All of a sudden, I see this guy go by that I was in a meeting with. And I'm like, how do I know anybody in the Italian airport? So I call, and he's from Greece. And I was like, hey, he's like, oh my God, I just missed my flight to Greece. I was like, I just missed my flight to Italy. I mean, to Chicago, back to US. And he's like, this is the last flight. And he goes, there's no hotel rooms. I was like, oh, that's not good. So
and you don't have a credit card anyway. So
I don't have a credit card anyway. So then I called this other friend of mine, who I was traveling with, who was leaving out of the other airport, and she's at a restaurant, and she runs into this other woman who was traveling back to Canada, and she said, oh, Richard, there's 2 airports in Milan. I booked a hotel at the airport you're stuck at, and I can't use it. It's a free hotel room.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, you got goosebumps?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm like, what do I say? She goes, and she has a really long last name. I said, she goes, just say you're my husband and go to the hotel. And I'm like, okay. So I had a hotel for the night.
Wow.
Right? The next morning I get up, I call to thank my friend. And so she's like, she was coming in and she says, I'm going to a meeting. Your flight's not till tonight. She goes, why don't I just take my taxi by you and pick you up at the airport and you can come to my meeting. So I go to her meeting, which is at this university, Domus Academy. And I am just a fly on the wall. You know, I don't want to say anything. And they're having this meeting. And it's about teaching faculty. And the Italians are very gracious. I come to lunch. So I go to lunch And she goes, and what do you do? And I said, well, I'm an architect, and I used to be the Disneyland architect. And she like slams her hands on the table and she goes, I just got a fax from Ferrari to design a new theme park. And I was like, who am I going to get to design this theme park? And you're sitting with me at lunch. And I got the contract
Oh
to
my God.
design a theme park for Ferrari.
Wow.
From missing my flight.
Yeah.
So
See,
that changed my whole perspective. So now when something I think was, it's like, oh, that didn't work. It changed my whole view. Now I'm like, oh, God's got
what
something
does this
better for me.
mean?
Yeah.
What things are going to come out of this?
I'm like, pay attention.
Yeah. Okay, so one final question before we wrap this up. What one piece of advice would you give to somebody who's in business to help them with either developing relationships or just, it doesn't even have to be that. Just what one piece of advice would you give somebody to be more successful?
I think clarity of the definition of your personal success, right? So when you're in business, you have a mission statement, or when you are in working with a company or co-creating or whatever, you have a definition of what your personal goal is. So the one piece of advice would be self-awareness of what your definition of success is, because not everything, it's like being a farmer, you're planting all these seeds, right, for future crops to grow.
Right.
And in business, sometimes your window of seeing things come to fruition have longer incubation periods.
Right.
And so I would just be aware of your long-term success. Like, because I try to do a short-term success project, a medium, and a long-term success. So awareness of your definition of success. Secondly is be able to tell a child what you do for a living.
Smart. Yeah.
What do you do? I mean, my kids think I color and I work with, paper and pencils and, what does your father do for a living? My dad colors.
Right.
And so now they're in middle school, high school, they got a little more sophisticated, but back in the day, I'm like, really? That's what you think I do? And you make a lot of mess, Dad. You tear things up, or we go visit you and there's construction and dust, like everything's a mess. And the people are always like, stress out, running on the construction site. And I'm like, wow. So find a way to understand what you do. I deliver innovative ideas, right? So now that helped me clarify. So in business, my one piece of advice is your awareness, and then be able to simplify what it is you do. Just do do you make people happy? Do you deliver, do you help people become the best they can be?
Right.
Do you just figure it out what it is you do?
Right.
Like kids right now are going to college, and I'm going to be speaking at the kids' high school. And I thought to myself, this is such an interesting time, because I don't think you should be choosing a career. I think you should be choosing a mission statement, because the jobs will not even be created that you'll be going into when you graduate.
Yep.
So are you going to be developing, designing, creating, caring for, enhancing? What is it that you're going to be doing? And is it for people or is it for products?
Right.
Because I can't say that I want to go into be, a phlebotomist, because we might be doing telemedicine. So we don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sometimes I have the opportunity to coach high school kids through career assessments, and I did a talk at my kids' high school recently, and I talked to them about pay attention to yourself for self-awareness and figure out what lights you up. No matter what you're doing, what is it that gets you excited? What do you love to do? Because that's a clue that you can go towards, right? That's a clue that can help you go towards. Sometimes it takes us a while to find what our purpose is in life. Like you started as an architect, now you do neuroscience. That wasn't on your agenda when you first started, but it was something that lit you up. So I tell kids and I do this with my kids, when I see something light them up, I'm like, well, what does that mean? Where can you take that? What can you do with that? How can you explore it? Because, finding what gets you excited, what you're good at, and what the world needs, those three things will help you go towards not only what makes you happy, but how you can serve the world in a way to make you successful and the world successful.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think the power of you communicating to high school students and the clarity of how you say it is that look at what you do that lights you up. Again, I mean, Patrice, it is so powerful. You want your kids, you want your spouse, you want your staff, you want people to thrive.
Yep.
And for them to thrive, they have to know more about what makes them thrive. I mean, hopefully they can say it to you. I love organizing chaos, or I love calmness, or I love to work outdoors, or I love to work with people. Like, just know that part. It's so
And
important.
you and I think like, oh, that's just common sense. But a lot of people don't look at that naturally. They don't take the time to try and figure out and pay attention to what lights them up, to the action they're doing. So when you ask them that question, they can't answer it. So it's a practice of being self-aware and paying attention to the feelings inside of you. If you go home at the end of the day and you're all stressed and totally drained you, think about like, what were the actions that you were doing? What were you doing that day that drained you and that made you feel terrible? Like, that might not be the path that you want to take,
Yeah, exactly.
Because it takes a while, and it's a path, right? It goes like this. It's not like I'm going to climb the ladder, and some people do that, but if you're really going towards fulfillment, you're going to follow the path and follow the signals to what lights you up, I think.
Yes, and if I can just stick in a little sentence on neuroscience, right? There's 4 chemicals in your brain that are your happiness chemicals, right? And it's called, think of it simply as a dose of happiness. And dose, D stands for dopamine.
Right.
It's a chemical that your body naturally releases: oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. DOSE. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And the dopamine gets released when you plan. That's me.
Yeah.
Oxytocin, right? Oxytocin gets released when you're empathetic, when you are connecting with people, when you help, coach, teach.
That's me.
That's you. That's your chemical. You light up. You have always lit up. I always tell people, when I met you and you had like a staff of 10 million people, I'm like, you are totally having a party over here, right? You are lighting up. Serotonin are people that love tactile. So people that love to bake, cook, garden, make things, go into animals, floral. People that like to touch and contact, massage therapists, physical therapists. And endorphins are people that are more athletic, the people that like puzzles, air traffic control, emergency rooms. Those people get energy from constantly having to be on and push themselves. So if you look at yourself and think of your children and your family and your spouse and your staff, what are your 4 chemicals that make you happy? Do you enjoy planning? Do you enjoy connecting with humans? Do you enjoy making something? Do you enjoy the pivoting, the constantly?
And it must be that we blend all 4 of those, right? In some way, like there may be one that's more prevalent, but all of them in some capacity, but one may be the strongest. Is that how it works?
Yeah, and population-wise, 48% of the United States is endorphins. They're the go. The next group is planners, and then the other 2, which are more exclusive, are the oxytocin and the serotonin. They're smaller percentages. They're in the teens, the numbers. And so if you recognize your customers, a lot of your customers are used to motion. Sometimes, at least in my case. And so I have to recognize, I always ask them, what do you do for fun? Right? And they're like, oh, I'm a triathlete. I'm a cook. I race horses. I like to do puzzles. I enjoy maps, history. Like, I listen for what they do in their pleasure time, and it gives me an idea of the chemicals that get released in their brain that make them happy.
Wow. Well, that is amazing. And I don't know if we can top that after that. So I'm going to not ask any more questions, because I want to keep that I want to thank you for your time. This was so great. I really appreciate it. And we'll do it again when we have.
Yes, please. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
And I'm grateful that everybody's doing well, and we just want everybody to thrive. That's why we do this.
Yeah, for sure.